All right. So I'll go ahead and get started. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm Sergeant Kevin Allen, and I'll be your moderator this evening for the presentation. We're here today to talk about the 2022 annual report, and we'll hear from Chief Lovell, and then we'll hear from our precinct commander, Craig Dobson. First, a couple of housekeeping matters. We'll be taking questions in the chat after the presentation. And I know that as you're viewing the presentation, questions may occur to you, and I want to invite you when that happens to go ahead and put those in the chat. We'll wait till everyone is finished at the end to answer the questions. And we'll try to get to as many of those as possible. But please feel free to type in questions in the chat. And the way it'll work is your questions will come in, and then I will monitor those and send that question to the appropriate person, whether it's Chief Lovell or the commander or somebody else that's on the call. Sometimes we get several questions on the same topic, and so I'll do my best to consolidate those so we can get to as many as we possibly can. Also, a reminder, we're going to be recording the presentation, and we will put the recording, we're actually live streaming, and then we'll put a recording later on YouTube. So if there's something that you missed, you'll be able to come back and view it again. If you have any technical issues, feel free to put any questions in the chat. Our host is also monitoring that and can answer any questions as they come up. All right, with that, we'll get into the presentation, and I'd like to introduce Chief Chuck Lovell.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you everyone for coming out tonight to hear a little bit about PPB's 2022. I know there's a lot of other things you could be doing on a lovely summer evening, but we're definitely glad you're here. So I'm pleased to have this opportunity to talk with all of you about 2022. To get the conversation started, I'm going to share with you an overview of the major issues from last year, and where possible, provide updates on where we are today. The challenge of reporting on last year is that by the time the report comes out, things may have changed. So we'll try to give you the latest information about certain issues. Before we go any further, I want to say how proud I am of our professional, sworn, and professional staff, our personnel, and how grateful I am for their resiliency. We had more challenges in the last few years than in any time in modern history, and yet they continue to be innovative and come with solutions to whatever problems are presented to them. I want to publicly share my support for them and thank them for the amazing work they continue to do for our city every day. So tonight we'll be sharing both our accomplishments and challenges. We hope by doing so, we'll build greater trust and understanding with the community and talk about the current state of PPB within the community. Community policing remains our goal, and a positive relationship between police and the community is necessary for success. But there are obstacles in our way. We've heard from community members about their desire for greater police presence and response. Messaging our limitations can lead to fear within the community, that they are not being heard or that meaningful solutions are too far off. We want to be realistic and manage expectations, but balance that with the hope of progress as we reimagine public safety. Tonight, I'll provide a summary of the annual report, and then we'll answer any questions you may have. Let's start with some of the main themes of last year. Staffing remains a challenge in every division with both our sworn and professional staff. We'll be talking about that tonight and what we're doing to address it. We'll talk about the increase in crime and fatal crashes tonight and what is being done to address that as well. It's important to note that Portland Police do not operate in a vacuum. Our partners also face challenges, both in the jail and with prosecutions of the cases that we bring. We'll also talk about the use of deadly force, the STOPS data report that just came out, and how we intend to keep our commitment to bias-free policing. Let's start with our accomplishments. Our equity and inclusion team completed the Bureau's 5-year racial equity plan and continues recruiting members to the Equity Advisory Council. The Bureau's recruitment efforts were revamped, and the Bureau received 1,513 applications for police officer, hiring 80 new officers. I'll tell you up front that 63 sworn members either resigned or retired last year, so that's only a net gain of 17. However, we're proud of the hiring efforts and certainly the number of applicants. We're still seeing people who want to be Portland police officers, and that's very encouraging. We revised and created more than 20 directives in 2022. New directives included procedural justice and wellness. Additionally, the team updated the suite of mental health related policies that are the center of the focus of our DOJ settlement agreement. We also overhauled the Bureau's policies pertaining to reporting and reviewing uses of force, including establishing a clearer standard for when force is authorized and the accompanying reporting and investigation requirements. And finally, we updated policies related to foot pursuits and consent searches that we'll discuss later. Our training division was busy as always. They conducted academies for in-service, advanced academy, cadets, sergeant's academy, leadership training, and more. They are also responsible for training all of our recruits and public safety support specialists. They conducted training evals for most of its programs to identify ways to enhance quality of training, maximize training time, and improve operations. Our wellness program continued to make investments with pilot programs for healthy food and sleep classes. Wellness remains a top priority to help with retention of our members, as well as increase morale by improving emotional, mental, and physical fitness of our members. Despite our staffing levels, our precinct commanders were charged with using their resources as effectively as possible. They looked for ways to conduct missions, directed patrols, bicycle patrols, and neighborhood response team missions in ways that impact the rises in crime documented in the report. As you know, stolen vehicles have increased drastically over the last year. Officers also noticed a nexus between stolen vehicles and illegal weapons. Responding to this trend, our East Precinct began a series of stolen vehicle missions, or as we call them, SVOs. In order to ensure these missions were informed and data-driven, PPB SVO leadership approached researchers at OHSU who agreed to review both the data and methodology proposed by our team at East. As a result, evidence-based practices have been refined through the unique collaboration. The partnership has shown incredible results. The data showed in the non-evidence-based practice missions, only 1 in every 31 vehicles stopped was an occupied stolen vehicle, and the arrest ratio was 1 in every 6. In the missions conducted after the evidence-based practices were applied, 1 in every 6 vehicles stopped by the team is a stolen, and someone is arrested once in every 3 stops. We reformulated the entertainment detail in 2022. As people began coming back to the bars and late night establishments, we observed an increase in the number of shootings in these areas. We responded by restaffing this detail to provide patrol coverage during peak hours. The number of shootings after the entertainment detail was reconstituted last year were 0. Street racing has been a chronic problem in recent years. Illegal street racing continues to be a seasonal event, drawing hundreds to these dangerous events. Many people are armed, often they're occurring in multiple locations at the same time. Missions were conducted in last year in response to street racing. Here again, we have observed results. Last year, we anticipated several hundred events, but there were only several dozen. We need the appropriate resources to continue the good work resulting from these missions by putting together teams for this purpose. We also work with our legislative partners to pass Senate Bill 615, which increases penalties for street racing. This bill becomes effective in September. Our neighborhood response teams are on the front line of our response to the rising crime. They were highly effective at addressing cases of criminal behavior involving larger groups. We hope to expand their work more broadly citywide, as there are several other areas where this work is needed. Our Central Precinct Bike Squad was also very effective downtown and in Northwest, especially addressing fentanyl use, illegal weapons, and stolen vehicles. These results show the value of proactive policing, and we need appropriate staffing to grow the work and tremendous results of their efforts. Our behavioral health unit continues to be a significant resource. They did around 99 trainings and events last year, not only with the city, but also with private organizations and other law enforcement personnel. Our Office of Community Engagement integrated the Bureau's bias crime unit with community advisory councils to improve communication, trust earning efforts, and to allow for a cultural exchange. The office also facilitated many other community meetings, workshops, and cultural engagements that help foster meaningful relationships. The Bureau continued conducting its Community Police Academy, in which community members work with police officer partners in a day-long setting of classroom and practical scenarios. PPB also continued its Community Active Shooter Preparedness, or CASP, which has delivered about 200 classes to safety-impacted community organizations and businesses since 2013. While we had accomplishments for which I am very proud of the employees of the Bureau, we also face many challenges. As I mentioned, staffing is a big part of this conversation. I was looking over my notes for last year and how I discussed that I had to make the difficult decision to move officers from traffic, narcotics, public information, community engagement, and more to increase the number of patrol officers to about 375 officers. Currently, we have 286 patrol officers. You can see that was only a temporary fix. While we have not been seeing the attrition that we saw over the last few years, we do know that as many as 100 sworn members are eligible to retire in 2023. Because of this, the Bureau will need to be ready to maintain a high rate of hiring to ensure is it adequately filling the positions of those who retire. We also have many officers in the training phase at any given time, and anyone hired today cannot go to the state academy for several months due to the backlog. We have a young workforce. An observation I recently heard hit me as being really profound. The majority of those who will serve as officers in the coming few years don't even work here yet. The need to recruit and retain qualified candidates is critical for us to address. We often talk about patrol, but we also face staffing issues throughout the Bureau, including our investigations branch. Insufficient staffing impacts our proactive policing. We are limited in doing missions to try to focus on prolific thieves, drug houses, chronic livability issues, and other issues that community members say they want addressed. Finally, it's important to discuss our professional staff, who are the foundation of our Bureau. Last year, we hired 52, but we lost 34 professional staff. Our records division staffing was the lowest it had been in modern history. I'm happy to say it has been staffed up and is making great strides in the backlog. We've been challenged to meet our minimum staffing on the street. Our analysts define minimum staffing as the number of officers we need to respond to 911 emergency calls. We're currently focusing on how best to respond to these calls. We continue to work with the Bureau of Emergency Communications, or BOEC, which is responsible for the 911 non-emergency system and the Community Safety Division. We've made progress on diverting calls to the most appropriate responders. Shootings, homicides, and other violence impacts our ability to timely respond to other types of calls. In addition, we often have officers from one precinct travel to another in order to help that precinct with their call load. We understand that even one extra minute can deeply impact a victim or decrease the chances of apprehending a suspect. People want and expect a police response when calling for help for a crime, and we strive to be there for them. Staffing also dramatically affects our ability to engage in effective community policing. As I've been saying since taking this job, building community trust is a top priority for this organization. That requires stronger relationships, which take time to cultivate. Our officers need more time to be able to build those vital relationships. Let's turn to crime statistics. In 2022, person crimes decreased slightly by 2%, but remained above the prior 5-year average. We continued to see gun violence. This number remained fairly stable, with only 7 fewer incidents reported in 2022, for a total of 1,308 incidents. Shooting incidents were 48% higher than the prior 3-year average. There were 94 homicides in Portland in 2022, including 76 that involved a firearm. This was an increase of 6% over 2021. Last year, I made the decision to temporarily shutter the cold case unit. This was in order to create 3 teams of detectives. This gives us more effective coverage to address the drastic rise in homicides. In the 10 years prior to 2020, Portland averaged about 25 homicide offenses per year. So you can see the significant jump. We've had a 60% reduction in staffing in our narcotics and organized crime unit, which investigates drug traffickers. Meanwhile, our community is seeing an increase in overdose deaths. We received some figures recently from our narcotics unit, and they're startling. These are the overdose cases that are reported to PPB. You can see the overdose deaths per year here, 159 during 2022, with the majority of them being fentanyl. But year to date, we're already at 151. This could be almost 300 by the end of the year at this current pace. The availability of illegal drugs continues to increase and remains at an all-time high. Property crimes increased 11% over the rate in 2021 and was 20% above the prior 5-year average. In 2022, vandalism increased by more than 2,500 offenses compared to 2021 and was up 66% compared to the prior 5-year average. 2022 had the highest volume of motor vehicle theft on record, with 11,098 offenses reported. A 20% increase over 2021 and a 50% increase or 51% increase over the prior 5-year average. Burglaries were up 17% compared to the prior year and 26% compared to the prior 5-year average. Car prowls, meaning the theft of items from inside a car, increased by 12%. Reports of robberies at businesses increased 41% in 2022. Now moving to traffic, in 2022, 68 people died on Portland streets. 32 of them were pedestrians. This is the highest number since 1948. And you can see the numbers here broken out in other categories. Just recently, I relaunched the traffic division on a limited basis. I'm happy we have the motorcycles back doing traffic enforcement and focusing on the high crash corridors. Now I want to move in a different direction and discuss other important topics of interest to the community. The Bureau's training is always a top priority. Training is a critical part of our learning. PPB's training division delivers a wide variety of trainings. Our analysis and research team began to conduct an assessment process for crowd management training in the fall of 2021. This work was further expanded in 2022 to help address concerns related to the use of less lethal equipment. The training division conducted a 2-day in-service training for all sworn members. The first day of training focused on legal updates, patrol procedure principles, firearms, and scenario training, which incorporated critical incident response, procedural justice, and crisis intervention skills. The second day of training focused on mental health response resources, such as Project Respond and Portland Street Response, active bystandership for law enforcement, or ABLE, scenario training, and directives pertaining to use of force, workplace harassment, and mental health. Through our learning management system, we published numerous training videos on a number of directives and legal updates, which is an effective and efficient way of delivering this type of training. Training is woven into everything we do. Our officers are trained in implicit bias and procedural justice. Next, I want to talk about force, which again is an important topic that always needs to be discussed with our community. Force is an area that has a huge impact on our relationship with the community. We spend a tremendous amount of effort to ensure our uses of force are appropriate and that we hold officers accountable when they act outside of policy. We emphasize our overarching principle regarding the use of appropriate and constitutional force in training, as well as in our force policy. Our directive says the community expects and the Portland Police Bureau requires that members use only the objectively reasonable force necessary to perform their duties and overcome the threat or resistance of the subject under the totality of the circumstances. Officers initiated 54,380 calls for service in 2022. Force was only used in 0.37% of these calls. Community members or visitors initiated 223,748 calls for service in 2022. Force was only used in 0.2% of these calls. There were 9 uses of deadly force, 4 of which were fatal, 3 resulted in injury, 1 person was uninjured, and in 1 case, the result is unknown. We understand how applications of deadly force impact our community, and I want to assure you that these cases were thoroughly investigated by both PPB and the District Attorney's Office. In all uses of deadly force, we follow a stringent process, which is reflected in Directive 1010.10. To be transparent about this, summaries of these incidents and every deadly force incident since 2010 are on our website, and I encourage people to look at them on the Open Data portal. Not only is our deadly force information on our website, but you can find all of our use of force numbers on our Open Data portal. In addition to force data, we post stops data on our website. We update our data quarterly and then do a comprehensive analysis of the quarterly data on an annual basis. The 2022 annual stops data report was published this month and is available on our website. PPB performed 13,654 driver stops in 2022, a 3% decrease. While the data shows a decrease, this is likely due to the elimination of the traffic division and therefore will likely reverse with the partial restaffing of this division. Non-moving violations occurred at a higher rate than in 2021, although this number was nearly equal to 2020. A missing or expired license plate was the primary stop reason. Last year's stops data showed racial disparities in stops. As a result, we made significant changes in our policy and procedures for consent searches and provided training on it. 2022 data on consent searches shows less than 1% of drivers were asked to consent to a voluntary search, the lowest rate recorded since data collection of this began in 2018. As part of the stops data collection process, PPB's Strategic Services Division conducted an audit for compliance with policy and procedure. They found inconsistencies in 39 cases. Once the inconsistencies were discovered, the matters were referred to the Internal Affairs Division. Supervisory investigations were then completed for all the cases, and the findings were reviewed by the Internal Affairs Division. The review found that many of the reported incidents were caused by a lack of understanding of all the requirements of the new policy and procedure. There was also confusion about reporting when multiple units were assigned to the call, which resulted in data not making it into the system. The investigations resulted in productive conversations around Directive 650, which governs search, seizures, and inventories. As a result of this process, PPB implemented remedial training on the consent search policy. The training was assigned in May of 2023 and was reviewed by all Bureau members. The Strategic Services Division continues to monitor and audit the process, and I don't expect these issues going forward. We continue to also discuss with community members rights and responsibilities. Those discussions include highlighting that stops and searches are governed by the US and state constitutions, as well as Oregon law. And when stopped, community members have a responsibility to comply with an officer's direction. The legislature recently updated the law in this area in a manner similar to PPB's new policy. PPB has implemented new practices to ensure compliance with these changes. Officers will create a record of their request to search and provide written explanation of the right. Going beyond the new state law, PPB policy requires officers to provide a card that explains in 5 languages a person's right to refuse to consent to search. This card explains to people that they have the right to say no when asked for consent to search and to withdraw their consent at any time during the search. These steps do not affect existing authority to conduct a search without consent. If the officer has a legal basis to search a person or their car, then please be aware that the officer may still do so, even if the person refuses to give consent for the search. The results of the stops data raise questions about bias-free policing due to the disparities found in stops related to persons of color. This is why I made the change to consent searches. Unfortunately, I don't have reliable data yet on the impact of this change. I want to assure you that our directives require officers to engage in bias-free policing. These requirements go beyond the requirements of state law. All officers have been trained on implicit bias. The Bureau's Equity and Inclusion Office continues to develop trainings to help officers bring an equity lens to their work in order to decrease bias in policing. This past year, we adopted a policy and conducted a video series on interacting with people in the LGBTQIA2S+ or queer community. This was a proactive effort on our part to address issues that are faced by these community members. First, as many of you are aware from the media, there were survey responses that were made that were non-constructive. I expect members to interact with everyone with respect and dignity, and I will not tolerate anything less. My intent with this training and education is to increase member understanding and positive interactions with the community. Approximately 900 members, both sworn and professional staff, completed the training. Of those 900, there were 261 responses to 3 anonymous surveys, most of which were positive or neutral. I'm proud to say that PPB is one of the first law enforcement agencies to have a directive and training on interacting with the LGBTQIA2S+ or queer community. I'm proud of our directive and our training. To show the members of the Bureau how important this training was to us, all 5 of the chiefs filmed opening remarks for it. And in conclusion, I hope this information is helpful and that it gives you a better understanding of the Police Bureau, of the various things that occurred in 2022, some of the work that's been done, and what remains to be done to address crime, concerns, trust, and livability in the community. I encourage you to get involved either in a community or neighborhood group. Stay informed by following our news, budget updates, open data, and more. We always welcome any kind words and support for our officers out there each and every day. We still need your help to encourage and support those interested in becoming members of the Bureau in either a sworn or professional position. Individuals of all backgrounds and experience help provide value to our agency and our community, so please help us recruit. Thank you, and now I'd like to introduce Central Precinct Commander Craig Dobson.
Commander Dobson, are you there? I just lost him. I wonder if he hit the wrong button. He may come right back. So while we're waiting for Commander Dobson, I'll just remind, I noticed there were a number of people that came in during the presentation. So welcome, we're glad you're here. There will be opportunities to ask questions. And so if you have any, please type them into the chat and we will go through those questions once we get to the end of the presentations. So I am looking. I do see Craig Dobson there. So Commander Dobson, whenever you're ready, you go ahead and unmute and take it away. I see you. I don't hear you yet, though. It looks like you might still be muted, sir.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can
All
hear
right.
you now. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. Sorry about that. Pretty typical for me. And I appreciate the chief going first because he is able to cover a lot of the things that I was going to cover as well. I'm Craig Dobson. I'm the commander of Central Precinct, and luckily I know most of you because of meetings prior to this. Tonight, I'd like to spend just a few minutes talking about Central Precinct. For those of you who aren't familiar with Central Precinct, or who are, and I'd just like to remind you, we have basically 41 square miles, just over 41 square miles of area that we cover. It goes from the St. John's Bridge all the way south to the Clackamas County border in Lake Oswego, as well as 39th, all the way out to Washington County. Tens of thousands of people live within our border, and there are roughly 52 either whole or partial neighborhoods within the borders of Central Precinct, 13 of which are on the east side of the Willamette River, and 29 of those neighborhoods are on the west side. In addition, Central Precinct is also a hub to commercial and industrial areas, as well as within its borders, critical infrastructure, as well as heavy manufacturing. As we moved into 2022, we continue to break out of the lingering effects of COVID. And to this day, we still have not seen the numbers of individuals that normally we see come traveling through Central Precinct to shop, to purchase things, to dine. However, things are slowly becoming brighter, thank goodness. As the chief discussed, crime data in Central Precinct alone, of those calls that he talked about earlier, we took just over 96,000 of those calls, which was just slightly up from 2021. Consistently over the last 2 years, our calls for service have remained largely in the late morning and early afternoon midweek time period, and which is a little bit different than pre-pandemic, when most of our calls for service were in the evenings or early evening and on the weekends. Much like last year, the vast majority of our calls for service were welfare checks, stolen cars, disturbances, unwanted or suspicious people. And unfortunately, as you know, the trends, as the chief talked about, were increases in crime and violence through 2021 and into 2022. A couple of actually crime decreases that we saw here in Central Precinct: aggravated assaults decreased by 1%. Stolen vehicle parts, such as catalytic converters, also decreased by about 5%. And if you recall, there was a trafficking ring about mid-year last year that was arrested out in Beaverton. And we believe that that probably had an effect on the thousands of catalytic converters that we were seeing being stolen. Arsons also decreased an additional 35% from the prior year, which was great to see. There was a huge spike in 2020 during the civil unrest. Boss talked about force, and of those 96,000 calls that we took last year at Central Precinct, we only used force in 236 of those calls, which was basically a 0.25% of the time that officers had to respond to a call that we had to use force. Of that force, about 75% of it was what we consider Category 4 type force, which is resisted handcuffing or control against resistance or a controlled takedown, where we're trying to overcome the resistance of an individual struggling, either by holding them down or handcuffing them or trying to set them on the ground, which is very low level force. When we look at free speech, which is one of the big issues in the downtown core area, our trend continued similar to 2021, whereas we moved out of civil disturbances that we saw so much of in 2020, and we went back to the more traditional peaceful protests that Portland typically has, which was refreshing. The chief touched on the entertainment district, and that was one of the positive signs of returning to normalcy here in the downtown area. Starting in 2020, we began to start seeing folks come back into the downtown area, particularly into the entertainment district. In 2021, which was 2 years ago, we worked with our community to help build a better security, worked with providers to provide a better security feeling downtown, but not be able to staff it. When we got to 2022, we recognized that because of the crowd sizes, that we would start, unfortunately, seeing probably some of the violent crime and the guns coming into downtown. And that's exactly what we saw. So early spring, we began devising and looking at how we could staff that. We made some hard decisions in late spring to address the increased shots fired calls that we were getting around the entertainment district. And it required us to reshuffle our staffing to provide assets into the area. After reviewing the data and discussing with our partners and our neighbors, we reconstituted our entertainment district with 1 sergeant and 6 officers, and then took many steps with looking at how do we bring back safety into that area. We had a positive effect. Immediately, we saw by bringing that unit back into the entertainment district for the evenings and at night, we saw a decrease in the number of shootings in that area, which was a positive for what we thought. Strategically, it also gives us more officers at the times when we're seeing the more dangerous or higher priority calls. Typically, most of our shots fired calls and most of our active threat calls are in the evenings, and this allows us to be able to respond better with more personnel to those calls. Chief touched on it just a little bit, but we have 2 units that are proactive. We have a neighborhood response team and also a bike patrol downtown. We recognize that they play a critical role in helping patrol. We continue to have to prioritize their functions and restrict the tasks that they do so that we can focus on strategically targeting and removing criminal elements that have the highest impact on livability in and around our housed and homeless communities. These 2 units we use to deal with hotspots and chronic problem areas and individuals. Both are highly effective because they have the time to address problems outside radio calls. To give you an idea of the work that they do, I would encourage you to look for the bike team's Instagram page. They do an excellent job of being able to share the work that they're doing, and it's at PPB Central Bike Squad on Instagram. This year alone, they have taken thousands of fentanyl pills off the street and arrested dozens of drug dealers in the downtown core area. The neighborhood response team in April of this year also conducted a warrant and uncovered and shut down an elaborate ghost manufacturing operation. And so they have a large impact on what we can do proactively to try to squish some of the issues that we're facing. Chief touched on staffing, and I'd like to just touch how it affects here at Central Precinct. Internally, it's probably our largest challenge that we have is shortages. And although, as the chief said, we've been able to hire many more and been much more successful than some cities at hiring folks, we're still seeing a trickle of retirements and resignations. When we couple that with the gap of the 18 to 24 months that exists between when we hire an officer and when we have them fully trained, it makes getting to calls in a timely manner, and if at all, at best difficult. At the end of 2022, I had 88 patrol officers of an allotted 103, which is about 85% of my allotted strength. However, you gotta be kidding me. However, my computer decided to log me off right at the wrong time. Despite these shortages in personnel, we're still out there performing police functions and serving the community 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. But data and numbers are only part of the story. I'd like to take just a minute to talk about who works at Central Precinct. Having a diverse workforce is important. It ensures us that many viewpoints and perspectives are looked at. They provide us with better decision making, problem solving, more innovation and creativity, and a better understanding and inclusion of different backgrounds and cultures. Central Precinct's leadership team and supervisors are more diverse than any other part of the operation operations branch. We proudly have more females, BIPOC, LGBT plus, and different religious and ethnic backgrounds in our supervisor ranks than any other place in the ops branch. Our professional staff is similarly situated. We work as a family and we work hard to serve 24/7, 365. The Bureau's values are integrity, compassion, accountability, respect, excellence, and service. Over my tenure here at Central Precinct, our emphasis has been on customer service, which encompasses all of those values. Our mantra is one call at a time, take the resources needed to do the job safely, and do the call correctly. We must triage what we go to, and there are times when we can't make it to every call. But I ask my officers that when they go to a call, that they provide the best service that they can. Most of the time, they do an excellent job. But let's be honest, sometimes we're human. Because we're human, we miss the mark, and sometimes we fall short of that customer service goal. But we're always trying to meet that goal. In 2022, we recovered thousands of dollars of property. We arrested hundreds of individuals. We took thousands of pills of fentanyl off the streets, and we saved dozens of lives. Repeatedly in 2022, we responded to violent crimes. And being first on the scene, officers were literally able to administer first aid and save lives, and time again. Officers regularly give from their own means to help people in need, to the houseless, to make situations better. June of this last year, just to share a couple of stories for you. June of this last year, officers received a call of a stabbing in the downtown area. The primary officer arrived to find a victim profusely bleeding from multiple stab wounds. The officer applied a tourniquet to stop the bleeding and then had to apply a second tourniquet to successfully stop the bleeding. Once the victim was stabilized and sent to the hospital, the primary officer then searched and found the suspect blocks away and was able to arrest them quickly and safely without any further violence. Last June, we received a call from a victim where someone had stolen their dog out of their vehicle, leaving a note saying that they had stolen the dog for the safety of the dog due to heat, but refused to give the dog back. Officers responded and quickly ran out of leads as they attempted to get the dog back. The next day, the suspect demanded $100 from the victim for the return of the dog. The same officers were able to return and worked with the owner to set up a meeting time with the suspect, where they were able to arrest the suspect on a warrant and theft charges and get the dog safely returned to the owner. An additional anecdote I can tell you is one of our bike officers in one day administered Narcan to 4 separate individuals overdosing and was able to save them. And I think probably the best example I can share of the dedication that our officers provide at Central Precinct is just this last Saturday. It was a powerful and tragic reminder of the burden officers experience when they're doing this job. As the news reported, a call came in of a person making physical threats to the staff within the hospital. Officers, as they were attempting to get on the floor where the suspect was, the call changed from one of making threats to an active threat. When the hot call came out, when the radio call came out, every available officer in the precinct dropped what they were doing and headed to the hospital to help. When Central Precinct supervisors realized that they did not have enough personnel to do all the tasks that they needed to do and the size of the problem, they asked for help citywide. And every officer, again, citywide that could, responded to the downtown area. This is what it means to serve and protect the community of Portland. Our officers are more than happy to step out of what they're doing and serve our community. These are just a few examples of the professionalism and the care that our officers at Central Precinct provide the community of Portland. And I get to see those examples every single day. And although we're not perfect, and sometimes we make mistakes, sometimes we fall down, I am proud to serve them and you. And so I think at this point, boss, if we can turn it over to questions and concerns, we're back to you. I guess, Kevin, you're emceeing this event. Let's go with that.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Commander. I appreciate your profound words. Very good. We have a lot of participants. We're up to 30 participants, which is fantastic. So thank you all for joining us. And we're going to start taking questions in the chat. So if you have any questions for the chief, Commander Dobson, or any of us, please feel free to type those in. We have some time to answer those questions for you. The first one I think I'll send to Commander Dobson. There was a question about the bike patrol. Are there any plans to expand the bike squad? Central East Side mirrors much of downtown and also has nightlife as well. And there's a question about whether bike squad can help the East Side in addition to downtown.
If I had the ability, I would put more officers out on a bike. Having been a bike officer myself for 5 years, I recognize the value of bike officers. They see more, they smell more, they're in the public, they're able to communicate better with the public. The challenge is oftentimes because they're more exposed, you have to ride them in pairs. And so it's a bit of a personnel drain to be able to put bikes out there. We have looked at the Southeast Side. I know the nightlife over there, we use our entertainment district and have sent them over there to help monitor and work with the entertainment district over there on that side. But to be able to put more bikes out there right now, it's just not possible. I do sneak them over there every once in a while with my NERT team. I know when we did our 90-day reset on the Southeast Side, we had both of those units over there working quite regularly.
Okay, and Chief, I don't know if you had any thoughts that you'd like to add to that as well, while we wait for more questions to come in.
No, in a lot of the meetings I'm in, particularly regarding the downtown core area, the bike squad from Central Precinct is mentioned quite often. They are the Swiss Army knife, if you will, of solutions to some of the problems facing our businesses and residents downtown. And they, for a small 4-person team, they do a lot of work and cover a lot of ground. So I always want to give them kudos. And I think, they're really appreciated for the work they do downtown. Totally wish there were more of them, and they cover different hours and different shifts as well.
All right, still looking for questions to come in. This is your opportunity to ask any burning questions you have of us here at the Police Bureau, Chief Lovell and the Commander. While we wait for some of those questions to be typed into the chat, I can offer some of the frequently asked questions that we get, and this one really is specific to Central Precinct because it's about body-worn cameras. Chief, if you could speak to sort of the pilot program, what that's going to look like, and what the timeline is for cameras on officers.
Sure. Well, we're excited to be rolling out a pilot program for body-worn camera. That program's set to start at the end of August. In that pilot, the officers who are sworn and work at Central Precinct and in FIT, which is the Focus Intervention Team, who are doing the bulk of our gun violence work, they'll be the first ones outfitted under the pilot program. That program's expected to last a couple months as we figure out, kind of what some of the growing pains are, some of the implementation hurdles we have to overcome. And then after the pilot program, we'll roll that out to our entire patrol force and some of our other sworn members and other units that have direct contact with the public. There'll be some assignments that won't be required by policy to wear body cameras, depending on the work they do, if it's administrative or sometimes like the explosive ordnance unit or bomb squad. They sometimes are in contact with different things where the technology might interfere with some of the things that they're trying to work on or diffuse for safety reasons. They won't be required to wear body cameras and things of that nature. But it's a program we've long advocated for. We've wanted body cams for a long time, and we're glad we're kind of on the precipice of having them here in the city of Portland.
Yeah, and being a member of the communications team, I always want to highlight some of the opportunities that you have as community members to gain additional information, especially on this topic alone, because we just get a lot of questions for it, which is great. If you just go to our website at portlandpolice.com, right there on the homepage, there's a link to our body worn camera page. We do keep that updated too. It has updated timelines. It has the policy, the policy for the pilot program, and how that's going to work, and it also answer a lot of your questions. So please feel free to log into our website. You'll gain a lot of valuable information. I also want to highlight in the chat, we're starting to see just some positive feedback. Chief Lovell, we had somebody say about excellent presentation and to say thank you. And there's also a comment in there for Commander Dobson. Your willingness to serve our Northwest and Southwest neighborhoods is nothing short of exemplary. Thank you, and to all of your officers for your service. I would think it's important to highlight some of those positive comments, and we really appreciate that. And we do pass those along. I don't know if many of you know this, but we have our internal intranet where all of our officers can see information that's being spread around, whether it's crime alerts, suspect alerts, things like that. We actually put on that intranet page a box that we keep updated anytime we get a positive comment from a member of the community, and then we post those on there. So as officers are using the intranet, they're seeing these positive messages. We really are passing those along to folks, and we very much appreciate it. A question about the camping ordinance. I think I'll start with Chief Lovell, but I also want Commander Dobson to address this as well. How are you being impacted by no camping between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m.? Some of the new ordinance rules regarding camping. Are you dealing with this at all right now?
At the moment, no, not yet. That I don't think will actually take effect till August 7th for us. I know when it rolled out initially, the city's goal was to spend some time to give people information and some time to make accommodations and adjustments. So for the first 30 days or so, they really wanted to be more of an informational period. So we haven't really begun doing anything with that. I think the soonest we could do anything with it would be around August 7th. But it remains to be seen how frequently that'll be used, what it will look like in application on the streets. So I don't know. I worry a little bit about just the expectation that now that this camping ban is out there, that people will feel like, oh, the police will now make sure there are no houseless people on the streets anywhere, and that won't be the case. We'll use it where we can. There's actually some built-in warnings, 2 warnings people will receive before we can do any citations or things of that nature as well. So I just want to make sure I temper people's expectations around what that's going to look like in practice.
Commander Dobson, are you starting the process of discussing how that might work on a precinct level?
We've had some of the discussions. Again, we're working through the challenges of identifying how to do that and what that process looks like. Much of it, we're hoping, relies on the SSCC program within the city, and how they go forth. We're still working through some of the challenges we see with that.
Okay. Thank you both for that. A question just about the overarching challenges, and I'll direct this one to Chief Lovell. Chief, just looking at all of the challenges that you were listing out in your presentation, do you have any solutions that you can propose and hope for? And if you could look into the crystal ball over the next few years, what milestones would you like to see to bring the police bureau back to a place where we're not facing as many of these difficult challenges?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. For me, I think, the biggest thing for me right now Well, there's several, but I think the one that I really believe needs to happen as soon as possible is really bringing back some of the core services that we've had in the city for a long time and that are now gone. And you look around and they're needed more than ever. Um, One of the reasons I was so happy to see the traffic division come back is you look at our numbers around fatal crashes, pedestrian struck, and things of that nature. And those numbers are way too high. And having folks that can now come back and focus on that full time, I think is really important. Our narcotics unit, they've seen a decrease in staffing just to meet other challenges around answering calls for service and gun violence. But you look at the fentanyl overdoses, we're on track to maybe double last year's record pace. And they're spending the bulk of their time investigating fentanyl overdoses and doing investigations around those. That unit needs to be bigger, better staffed, and more equipped. So I think, getting some of those things back, getting the staffing fixed are huge. But I also feel like there's some opportunities as well. When you do have this staffing crisis, you have to look for ways to still be effective that maybe don't include people. And I think a lot of times that points you in the direction of technology. We've just started using unmanned aerial systems, or drones, as many people call them, to do some traffic reconstruction, and also on our CERT team callouts as well. And they've proved very helpful, very efficient. You don't have to put people in harm's way. There's some agencies now that are using drones as first responders, sending them out to go find people down, to do welfare check calls, things of that nature. They could get a drone there much faster, and then essentially free up an officer while this drone does some of the area checks and things of that nature. So I think a lot of agencies are looking to things like real-time crime centers, drones, and things like that to kind of overcome the challenges they're having with staffing. And I think, long term for me, I've always been a big believer about just being really kind of connected and embedded in communities. You heard Commander Dobson say they got 41 square miles, and his precinct's got a huge residential area in Southwest, a downtown core area, Old Town area that's had challenges for many, many years. The inner East Side, you've got Highway 30 out into an industrial area that has all kinds of different industrial materials and hazardous materials and things of that nature. You've got a college downtown. You have a lot on your plate, a lot of needs to meet with a small resource footprint. And I've always felt like, for us to have some more precincts and smaller precincts that can be more connected directly to community and community groups and neighborhood groups is something that would benefit this city and help our officers kind of be more connected at the neighborhood level. And I think, when I think back to when I got hired, we had 5 police precincts. Today we have 3, and we had 1,000 officers around that time. Today we have about 805, I think was the number I saw as of yesterday. So as a city, I think, right now there's probably some opportunities around space, office space, and space. And there's people who are interested in having the police in their neighborhood, in their area, in their buildings. So I'm hoping there's some opportunities and some synergies that maybe we can take advantage of that and get kind of re-embedded in community.
All right, thank you, Chief. Appreciate that vision. Couple more questions coming in the chat. For those of you that are still here, we do have a few more minutes of time. Well, more than a few. We budgeted until 7:30. So if you have questions, please type those in so that we can pass them along. The next question is about Measure 110, the decriminalization of drugs. I think I'll give both maybe Commander Dobson and the Chief a chance. I'll start with Commander Dobson. Could you speak to how Measure 110 has affected and what challenges that has placed on downtown specifically in Central Precinct?
Sure. I think it's a topic that in every meeting that I go to, whether it's a neighborhood meeting, a business meeting, I just met with the hotels, most of the hotels downtown today. 110 seems to be, a hot topic. And it appears that by the passing of 110, the decriminalization of drugs has absolutely had an effect in the downtown area, to the open drug use, to the open dealing that we're dealing with. It's been a challenge. Just this past weekend in the Washington Post, there was an article from Portugal. And from what I read, Portugal was the basis for how we built our Measure 110. And the creator of that back in Portugal, the professor, actually stated that it's been a failure there because of the funding and how things are working. And it's been a challenge here. Not having the ability to hold people accountable for things is making it hard and making it almost impossible for us to be able to do our job down here. And I think it makes it impossible for the community, the businesses, and everyone else is affected by what we're seeing in the downtown area because of it.
Chief, would you like to weigh in as well?
Yeah, I think Commander is absolutely right. We are definitely seeing some challenges with Measure 110. And I think, for our part, we want to make sure, we're not criminalizing people, particularly, the homeless community. And, I don't believe everyone needs to be in jail, but I think, the voices we're hearing now loud and clear downtown are really around accountability of some sort. And we do make a lot of arrests downtown. Our bike squad and our patrol officers do a lot of work that's directly related to fentanyl and drug use. But I think, I think as a community, we need to really take a step back and do some assessment around some of the things we're doing working. And if not, what are the next steps to maybe tweak them, change them, or take a step towards something that might be more effective. So, as time goes on, we'll see what happens with Measure 110 and some of the other things the legislature's putting forth around fentanyl use, and see if they're having an effect. And I think in time, the question and the conversation will be around, are there better ways, maybe better approaches to get some people off the street into some rehabilitative care, or the things that I think were really the hope going into 110.
Here's an interesting related question for you, Chief. Have you seen any data that shows people from other states are coming into Oregon because of Measure 110 and the relaxing of drug laws here in Oregon?
I haven't seen any data per se. I've heard anecdotally, though, people coming from other areas are literally being recruited to come here to sell drugs by others. And I can't imagine, some of the environmental issues we deal with here in Portland aren't contributing to that. So I don't know. I can't say that I've seen any hard data, but I have definitely heard anecdotally and from people that that is happening here on the streets of Portland.
Yeah, really interesting topic for sure. Chief Lovell, I'll direct this question to you. There was a lot of talk about gunshot detection technology like ShotSpotter. Where are we on that? Is that still being considered here in Portland?
I don't think it's off the table totally. We were looking at it much more closely recently. Our focus intervention team has a community group attached called the Fit Cog, which is their community oversight group. And they made a recommendation to bring ShotSpotter to Portland. So we did some community forums around it. I think PSEP took a look at it, had a lot of discussions. I was in favor of doing a pilot around gunshot detection, just to see if it's something that would be helpful. And ultimately, I think through all the discussions and just the timing, and we were in the process of really moving towards a ceasefire model, focused deterrent model for gunshot or for gun violence. And I think at the time we really decided it's better to really just focus our efforts around ceasefire. And I think part of the issue too with gunshot detection is if you ran a pilot, you'd have to have the money for the pilot. And then if you did get a lot more calls to go to, there's an idea that a lot of your shots fired calls are never even reported to the police. So would that have expanded the workload on an already taxed group of people as far as response? And then even if you were going to roll it out, it's very costly as well. So I think all those factors really gave us some pause as to looking at it right now. But I don't think it's 100% off the table either.
All right, we appreciate the question. This next one is kind of high level question as well. Really good one from Eric. Chief Lovell, really appreciate this forum. Thank you for this. Understanding complexities of the issue and the fact that the criminal justice system is more than just the police. It involves the county and the district attorney's office. How can community members support officers in enforcing lower level offenses? Smaller issues do tend to add up over time, and accountability on those smaller, lower level offenses can sometimes have an impact on the larger crimes that we see in downtown.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said in my presentation, we don't operate in a vacuum. We have a lot of partners who we rely on. We are just really one link in a chain. And we are kind of the front door a lot of times to the actual rest of the criminal justice system. So, you know, there's a lot of times where we'll encounter someone or get called to something, and the person who's the victim or business owner or whatever the case may be is like, hey, I've had this issue with this person repeatedly. You know, I'd like them, you know, taken to jail. I want to press charges or whatever the case may be. And a lot of times we're in a position where it's like the best I can do is give this person a citation. Because the jail is not booking for this particular crime. And I think that makes it tough when you have to, you know, look a community member, business owner, victim in the eye and tell them, you know, that the best I can do in this scenario is write this person a ticket and then leave, and they stay here potentially. And then, you know, as far as prosecutions and things of that nature, all of our partners are having their own challenges, be it staffing or other stuff, but we rely heavily on their effectiveness in order for us to do our work. And that goes for community-based organizations too. Now, a lot of times, you know, if we're taking someone to an intake with a community service provider or some other outlet other than, you know, jail, we really depend on those entities to be effective at whatever they do, be it rehabilitation, mental health services, addiction services, or what have you. So sometimes when that back end stuff is really strained, you get this cycle of dealing with the same people with the same issues over and over with no real resolution. But I think as far as what community can do, one, stay engaged, stay active, let us know when things are happening. I've talked to a lot of business owners in the last few years too, and some of them are, you know, say, hey, I don't want to report this because, you know, I don't want my insurance to go up, or I don't want my business or this area to become, you know, seen as problematic or having all these police calls. But if we don't know things are going on at your business in your neighborhood, then it's hard for us to do anything to help, or even direct resources or try to figure out some solutions with you. So I would say stay involved, stay connected. Don't be afraid to report things. I know the non-emergency, sometimes there's a wait and it's not always easy or quick to get through, but definitely stay diligent and be involved. And we'll do what we can to help problem solve or respond.
Can I jump in on that one?
Yeah,
Yes,
go
please
for
do.
it.
I think, you know, one of the pieces that I constantly hear is how do we help? And I think, like the chief said, being civically involved is super important. The policymakers that make the policies that determine who is able to go to jail and who doesn't go to jail, or what gets prosecuted, or where the purse strings are. It's important to know who those folks are and to stay engaged in having your voice heard, so that you can have an impact on what is going on around you, rather than just be a passive participant in it. Be active in it. Have your voice heard. Come together with your neighborhoods and your associations to be able to be one voice and be repeatedly heard, so that no one questions whether or not you're being what the public wants.
All right, outstanding. We have gone through the questions that I have, so I'll do kind of a last call then, if you will, for the members of the public who are on this call. If you have any last minute questions, feel free to type those into the chat, and I'll throw those out there. I do want to point out that Jerry with the bike patrol was given a shout out, and we'll have to tell Sergeant Ciota that he got a shout out from the community directly to the chief and the commander. Yes, Jerry Ciota is a 10, great sergeant. He also is quite often featured on the PPB Bike Squad Instagram page. So it's kind of fun to see that. So,
I think he just likes his picture taken.
that is also possible.
The bike squad question, because we don't have bike squads, one of the things that we've tried to do this year, a little bit different, is we have our PS3 program who are unarmed, non-sworn folks that are out there helping us as well. There are certain days that we try to get them out there to do walkabouts, and we have hit several different neighborhoods to be able to actually be walking out there and do walking patrols with them as well as officers. And so we've been in several different neighborhoods, and as we go into the summer, we hope to continue to be able to do that, because we know how impactful that is to have folks actually be able to come up and talk to you, be able to see us out there outside of a car, and just be able to have that interaction. So we have been trying to do that on a regular basis, once or twice a month.
Great. Yeah, I didn't even know that. So I learned something new too. That's outstanding. All right. I will give both Commander Dobson and Chief Lovell an opportunity to wrap things up and say thank you to our community members for joining us today, as I always do. I know both of them like to do that. So I guess I'll start with you, Commander, since you're already you got your microphone unmuted. If you have any wrap up thoughts, please go ahead.
I just want to say thanks. Thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting us. It has been refreshing here in the last couple of years to have so many people come and say thank you to us, and we hope that we can support you. One of the things that I've always said is, if we fail in that customer service piece, absolutely let us know so that we can correct that. You know, it's so important for us to be serving you with excellence and with compassion. And if we fail on that, we want to know about it so that we can correct it, so that we can continue helping you. Thank you so much.
All right. And Chief, I'll throw it over to you for closing thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Craig. You know, for me, it's just a heartfelt thank you to everybody. I love this opportunity just to kind of connect with some community folks, talk about what's going on at the Bureau, but you know, ultimately, we're your police force. We're here to serve you. We want to hear from you. We want to know what's important to you. And I'm big on service, and I know my command folks are as well. And we want to give you all the best service possible. We all know there's challenges everywhere for all of us. And, you know, as long as we kind of stay connected, work together, work hard, I think we can overcome those and just get to a better place. But it is always going to be dependent on us, you know, staying connected, working together. We're going to get a lot farther together than we are apart. So definitely appreciate everyone for being here and your partnership throughout the year.